All right, we'll keep tracking that story. Moving on to another big story of the day that's coming in from India, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi this morning ordered the withdrawal of a press release issued by India's Ministry of Information and Broadcasting last night. The release announced that journalists propagating fake news will have their press accreditation withdrawn. While the media debates the motives behind the release and the U-turn, We on asked this: how does one define fake news? Who has the authority to define it? How does one control the internet or chat applications without losing the tenets of democracy? Senior foreign editor Padma Rao examines these and other questions.
The press release by the Government of India landed on news desks across the country on a Monday evening. Its message was startling. Accredited journalists will pay with their press cards if the government decides their reports are fake, it declared. And stay that way as long as two statutory bodies created for regulating the media decide the issue. The next morning, India's media swung into action. It went into a huddle it called public meetings. But before the backlash could spiral out of control, a quiet message came from Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself. The press release was being withdrawn. Now, thousands of journalists in India are scratching their heads. What was that all about? It was President Donald J. Trump who coined the term fake news, using it to describe the undoubtedly biased media that ripped him to shreds, often floating incorrect stories about the rank outsider to Washington, D.C.'s predominantly left liberal charmed circle. Fake news, he called it.
I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake. I have to leave that word.
And one by one, the US president began to name and shame some of the biggest US media outlets on his Twitter feed. President Trump even announced his own fake news awards for those who maligned him. But could he announce in a seemingly innocuous press release one fine evening that the White House had decided to debar accredited journalists from practicing their profession as long as it took for his government to decide on the quality of their work? Absolutely not. Because the press of the United States of America are guaranteed fierce protection by the US Constitution itself. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution prevents the Congress from making any law abridging the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. The Free Press Clause, in addition, protects the publication of information and opinions and applies to a wide variety of media. It also protects against pre-publication censorship in almost all cases. While India's constitution doesn't expressly mention the media, its Article 19 guarantees both freedom of speech and expression, as well as the liberty to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. That includes journalism, of course. Of course, there are restrictions to India's Article 19. Defamation, contempt of court, decency or morality, state security, bilateral relations with other states, incitement to an offence, public order and maintenance of the sovereignty and integrity of India. Offenders can be hauled up for violating these reasonable tenets, but no law can be passed to abridge the media's freedom of expression. The Indian Constitution does not grant any power to any government to impose arbitrary restrictions on the media. An attempt was made by former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1976, but it was overthrown 2 years later. Article 361A is certainly a later-day constitutional amendment, but it affects the media covering parliamentary proceedings alone. And finally, for censorship, it can be imposed only if media coverage threatens to disrupt public order. Unfortunately for the government of Prime Minister Modi, which has otherwise many achievements under its belt, the hasty press release by a ministry and its quick withdrawal by the highest executive of the same government will leave more than a few traces of egg on many faces in the power corridors of New Delhi. There is no doubt fake news is one of the worst fallouts of the new world. But what allows salacious, factually incorrect news to get away? There's plenty that's wrong about fake news, fired mostly by a greed for subscribers or TRP ratings. There are no laws evolved yet to govern what is essentially a new space, that of the internet and satellite communications, that is the social media and chat applications. Many media concerns have no fact-checking departments and legal counsels other than on paper. These are mandatory requirements in most newsrooms around the world. Overall, and in the fiercely competitive media arena in India, scruples and best practices are frequently ignored. So does the world, does India need to act against fake news? Most certainly yes. But was the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting's aborted attempt the best way to go about it? Most certainly not. Satellite and internet communications belong to another yet undefined zone. Given the level of abusive, inaccurate discourse on all of them, regulation is most certainly called for. India's ministry is not ignorant, neither is the US President, a paragon of virtues himself. And yet, the avoidable incident of the mysterious press note brings an old saying to mind. It is only fools who rush in where angels fear to tread. Padma Rao, WION.